We know we belong to the land, and the land we belong to is grand. And when we say, we're only saying you're doing fine, Oklahoma, Oklahoma, okay.
Well, Oklahoma is, without doubt, one of my favorite musicals. And after I read what I am about to share with you, that was still the case. So I'm not making this video to, you know, ruin your experience of that musical. I'll just say flat out, I don't believe that just because a work of art might either be ahistorical or have any other kinds of problems or be deemed, to use a term I don't even like to use, problematic, um, that for that reason we shouldn't enjoy that work of art. However, it is interesting to learn about that backstory, um, and because it is an example of aspects of our history that are worth remembering, and also about how we grapple with that and how we have tried to sweep that under the rug. And surprising, uh, it's really surprising um, how all of this relates to the musical Oklahoma. But this is the thing. The Oklahoma Territory, before it was a state, was the final remaining territory of Indian country. Indian country used to be much larger than Oklahoma, but by the 1880s, it was the last remaining part of the territory that was called Indian country. And so um, pushed pushed off their permanent lands, Native Americans moved yet again. Indian country was successfully whittled down until it had been reduced to its southern tip, present day Oklahoma. The territory's population, drawn from all over the map, spoke to the wrenching dislocations of the 19th century. By 1879, it contained Cherokees, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Quapaws, if I pronounce that right, Seminoles, Senecas, Shawnees, Modocs, again, if I pronounce it right, Ottawas, Peorias, Miamis, Wyandots, Osages, Kaws, Nez Perks, again, if I pronounce it right, Pawnees, Poncas, Sacs and Foxes, Kickapoos, Creeks, Potawatomis, Cheyennes, Arapahos, Wichitas, Wacos, Tawakonis, Kichis, Caddos, Delawares, Comanches, Kiowas, and Apaches. Again, I probably mispronounced a few of those nations' names. It was and I do apologize for that. It was as if someone had depopulated most of Europe and shunted remnants from each remaining country to an allotment in Romania. And yet, even this compressed neutron star of Indian polities was vulnerable to incursions. There was talk of organizing it into a territory, as had been done with Kansas and Nebraska. And as in those two territories, whites started pouring in illegally. We are here with our axes and our plows, one group announced defiantly in an 1885 petition to Congress. Hundreds and thousands of our friends are on their way to join us from all the states of the West. We are here to stay. We deny the right of any man or mob of men, whether in uniform or plain clothes, to molest us. Indians regarded these squatters with horror. No matter how little is left the red man, such heartless wretches will never rest content or let the government rest until the Indians are made landless and homeless, warned the Cherokee advocate. It is beyond the power of words to express the character of such men, dead to all human feeling and knowing no law. Just as the Cherokee advocate feared, the government acquiesced to the settlers' demands, squeezing Native American land claims over to the territory's eastern side via allotment and distributing the western side to the whites. Some of that western land was parceled off by lottery. More was apportioned by race. At the firing of a federal official's gun, settlers sprinted to stake their claims. It was, the Census Bureau declared, the most rapid settlement of a territory in the history of the United States. By the way, this isn't me. I'm reading from How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr. So just to be clear, on page 43, 44, 45. In the venerable US tradition of naming places for the people who have been driven from them, the newly opened territory was called Oklahoma, a Choctaw word meaning red people. That left the eastern part of this as the sole vestige of Indian country. But squatters were streaming in there too. Seeing which way the wind was blowing, leading tribes called the convention open to all, Indian and non-Indian alike. They would apply for admission to the Union as a state that would not be exclusively Indian. It's a state that would not be exclusively Indian, but would at least have a substantial Indian population. It would be called Sequoia, after the silversmith who had designed the Cherokee syllabary. Congress refused to consider the petition. Instead, it allowed the settler-dominated territory of Oklahoma to absorb the would-be state of Sequoia. Oklahoma was admitted as a state in 1907, with a population less than 1/4 Indian. The final extirpation of Indian country, the uprooting, the destruction of Indian country, was a profoundly important event for Native Americans. 2 decades later, the Cherokee playwright Lynn Riggs set out to tell the tale. Here's the part that's surprising, that ties into the musical. Riggs conceived and wrote his play in Paris. He frequented the Café Les Deux Magots, if I pronounced that right, where Ernest Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald were also scribbling away. But his mind was on his childhood home. The result, Green Grow the Lilacs, offered a wistful celebration of Indian country on the cusp of change. It is a gentle, nostalgic play, though with a defiant ending. When, in the last act, a federal marshal appears on the scene, the characters refuse to cooperate with him, explaining that they are just plumb full of Indian blood and that they regard the United States as a foreign country. With that uneasy confrontation, the curtain falls. Riggs' play was well received when it debuted in 1931. Today, however, it is remembered less on its own merits than as the basis for the musical Oklahoma by Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein. I kept most of the lines of the original play without making any changes in them, for the simple reason that they could not be improved upon, at least not by me, Hammerstein told the press. Yet there was one noticeable change. Though the musical concludes with a confrontation with the marshal, it ends happily. The characters in Oklahoma say nothing about having Indian blood. Indeed, the word Indian Indeed, the word Indian is not uttered once in the production. Oklahoma presents its characters as whites enchanted by available land and brought to spasms of ecstasy by the thought that they might soon be living in a brand new state. We know we belong to the land, and the land we belong to.
Down to daisy circles in the sky. We know we
Immerwahr concludes, it is the jubilant refrain of the white settler. So again, not trying to ruin the musical at all, but it is it's an interesting story to think about. That you know, I wouldn't really expect a musical from the 1950s about the Oklahoma Territory to really show the indigenous perspective, and yet it was based on a play that was from an even earlier time, which did show that perspective. And so I think it's another case of where we assume that that almost that our ancestors are not we're not consciously um, ignoring certain realities, um, and certain aspects of what was going on in their day and what had been going on in what was then a more recent history. Um, but I mean, in this case, this is again, there was the conscious decision to basically take all of the lines from the old play, but also to sanitize the part that was unsettling, um, because uh, we needed to comfort the descendants of the settlers and not any other descendants of the people who had been pushed off of the land. So anyway, but again, to be clear, I enjoy that. I enjoy Oklahoma. I intend to watch it. I think I will enjoy it. I suppose that the knowledge that about this backstory will, in some ways, affect the experience of watching it. But again, if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and watch it. It's a great musical. That's really all there is for me to say now. So long, and thanks for all the fish.